Before we get started with this video, I just want to say that I like PaxTube. I've been subbed to him for a while now, and we were even mutuals on Twitter for a hot minute back in the day. I've had nothing but positive interactions with the guy, and on the off chance that you're listening to this, Pax, I enjoy your work and want to see you improve. Consequently, I'm not going to hold any punches with this response. Hope you enjoy.
Too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. And in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse.
PaxTube's The Dark Side of Vtubers is the definition of speaking for hours and saying absolutely nothing. With a runtime of nearly 20 minutes, it takes until somewhere around the 11:30 mark for the essay to actually start delving into what makes virtual YouTubers so darn heinous. Even once the video does reach this point, the substance of the expose is lackluster, to say the least. Until then, we're treated with quite an agreeable deluge of regurgitated information that most of the audience will already know. One can thus walk away from the presentation under the grand delusion that they've just learned something valuable or profound, when the reality is much more shallow. Overall, the endeavor is disappointing at best and absurdly careless, half-hearted, and melodramatic at worst, glossing over substantial points of contention that one could have with the VTuber phenomenon, while simultaneously lingering on meaningless drivel like boob physics and tasteless sexual humor. What I'm saying is that there are legitimate gripes that you can have about the VTuber community and the genre as a whole, but PaxTube isn't touching on them here, not even close. Pax opens his documentary with an 11-minute preamble on the dangers of parasocial relationships and the rising popularity of VTubers, the social climate of today, and how such factors have fostered the growth of the VTubers' target demographic of young, single male consumers. A decent foundation despite its dry, lengthy, and generally unsurprising content. I'm not here to knock the basis of this critique, just outline it so that we all understand where we're going with this. If you feel like I'm glossing over anything of importance, I encourage you to watch the entire product on your own. For the sake of brevity, I won't be covering everything, only the important bits. So we've laid the groundwork that men are single, lonely, and desperate for attention. Artificial relationships handcrafted by corporations designed to squeeze every monetary drop out of the general public are bound to prey upon such folks, which they most certainly do. Depending on your viewpoint, you might not find such behavior so sinister, but we'll operate under the assumption that we're agreeing with the presupposition that capitalism is parasitic or at the very least irreverent of human well-being, and that people ought to be prioritized over the successes of any given economic structure. I personally don't disagree. Unfortunately, Pax's task from here on out isn't so simple. Dictionary definitions and empirical data don't exist in the capacity that could argue the fact that VTubers are themselves parasites. But make no mistake, that is his claim, and to be honest, it's a downright cartoonish one.
What's perhaps most disturbing about the entire VTuber phenomenon is that these girls and the companies behind them know most of these men are struggling, and they're cashing in on it. They know their viewer struggles, they know they're feeling pain, and behind their artificial digital faces, they're laughing at them. They're laughing at them all the way to the bank.
This is just ludicrous. As someone with nationalistic conspiratorial viewpoints, Pax should know better than to oversimplify a subject in this manner. When discussing the problem of Jewish power, one does not unironically argue that Jewish folk are gathering in dark, smoke-lit back rooms, rubbing their hands together in maniacal glee as they watch white demographics drop like a line on a graph. The reality of the criticism is far more complicated than that. People are far more complicated than that, and to paint what are merely individual actors in the grand scheme of things as something so black-heartedly fiendish is patently ridiculous. I mean, for God's sake, Pax, who's really to blame here? Agents participating in a system, or the perpetrators of said structure? Blaming McDonald's the corporation for feeding indigestible sludge to the masses is one thing, perhaps even blaming the CEOs, but you wouldn't go so far as to attack the fry cook or the cashier, would you? You can't reasonably fault people for participating in a broken system, let alone characterize them as sniggering parasites leeching off of the catatonic victims of a fallen society. It's dishonest from an intellectual standpoint, and I expected much better from you on this point.
Most VTubers consistently use sex and sex appeal to squeeze even more money out of their lonely male audience. The streams of Iron Mouse, one of the largest English-speaking VTubers, begin with an animation of her character's virtual boobs jiggling. This is a common trend among English-speaking VTubers. Hololive, the largest Japanese VTuber company, fits many of its characters with similar giant bouncing boobs.
Continuing along the line of attacking the symptom and not the problem, Pax goes on to criticize VTubers for capitalizing on sexuality, utilizing such diabolical imagery as cleavage and above-average breast sizes to market themselves to young, vulnerable men. But this is about where his criticism of the VTuber models themselves ends, and I have to ask, why? There are actual, tangible connections between VTubers and pornography, a subject which Pax has been highly critical of in the past. Gargura, originally Senzawa, openly collaborated with pornographic model Belle Delphine on her song I'm Back before she went on to work with Hololive English. Vshoujo's own Silverveil did some pretty risque work with the MMD engine once upon a time, and Project Melody is a literal porn star VTuber. Those are just a few that I could come up with off the top of my head. Pax put together a 20-minute video dissecting VTubers as a genre, and bouncing boobs was really the best that he could come up with? And don't tell me that he didn't mention these because he didn't want to expose his viewers to overt degeneracy. We made it a point to showcase Project Melody several times throughout without once mentioning her name. Seriously, how on earth do you drop the ball this hard?
Some of these VTubers even encourage their audience to masturbate.
Jack off in front of the window. So this way, it will improve your mental and physical health at an optimal rate. And you just need to do this for a half an hour a day.
How was your third day of Non-Stop Nut November? Have you guys got your biggest nut yet?
Ah yes, nothing says humor like encouraging your audience's porn addiction.
I can't believe that I actually have to explain this. Okay, here goes. For those who aren't familiar with her, Neanders is one of the few virtual YouTubers who I actually enjoy from time to time. She's one of the only 3 that I'm subscribed to at the time of writing the script, though even then I've admittedly not watched much of her, let alone VTubers, over the past several months. I also never watch uncut live streams of VTubers, only the highly edited video content, so take my interpretation here for what it's worth. One of the qualities of Neanders' work that I particularly cared for when I watched her was her take on the sexual humor trend that most VTubers tend to fall prey to when they do comedy. She's very sarcastic, her delivery bordering on obnoxiously self-aware. Her style of humor is often a clear and direct parody of your typical sexual streamer. Frankly, though, you don't even need to know all this to determine that what she's saying in this clip is very, very clearly sarcasm. Normally people call this type of statement a joke. It's by the numbers absurdist humor. How nonsensical is the idea that masturbating in front of a window would be good for your health? The comedy is in the depravity of the hypothetical action, the ridiculousness of the scenario, and the thought that someone might actually go through with it. That's what makes it funny. And I don't know this one's name. The squirrel one? Yeah, I don't know. But this is also a joke. A sarcastic play on the No Nut November trend, just reverse. The humor, of course, being that Non-Stop Nut November is a subversion of your expectations. The comedy, again, being primarily derived from the absurdity of the idea of masturbating every day for an entire month. Tasteless? Certainly. But still a joke, nonetheless. Pax's reading of both of these statements is either intentionally disingenuous or just flat out retarded. He either wants you to view these as direct calls to action, or he truly believes them to be direct calls to action. And I don't think it has to be said, I never thought I would have to say this, but joking about degeneracy is not an incitement to commit degenerate acts. I'm not sure which is worse, the fact that he knows this and is lying to you about his interpretation, or the possibility that he truly doesn't understand the difference between encouragement and mockery.
In other words, fucking stop it.
To conclude, I didn't like this video, and you shouldn't like it either. It could have been better. A lot better. And putting it mildly, what we have right now is a half-baked hit piece tied together by a veritable shoelace of dishonesty and baseless conjecture. Pax can do better than this. I've seen him do better than this. And as a community, we shouldn't let bad criticisms like this and unfinished productions stand unchallenged. Especially when we know that the creator can do so much more. There are legitimate grievances you can have with VTubers, but there are none here. And the ones that are not argued to completion. I am not an infighter. We are all in this together. But all the same, a healthy back and forth keeps the blood from stagnating. Thanks for listening. God bless.
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words,